The battlefield in Ukraine has changed yet again, and Russia is losing the race to keep up. Ukraine just unveiled a weapon that's not only ingenious, but devastating. A mothership drone carrying smaller kamikaze drones ready to wreak havoc on Russian forces. This isn't just a new tactic, it's a direct response to being outgunned and outnumbered, and it's turning Russia's outdated war machine into scrap metal. For Ukraine, it's survival. For Russia, it's humiliation. This new system is already proving its worth, showing how far Ukraine has come in using innovation to fight against overwhelming odds. But how does it work? And why is it such a nightmare for Putin's forces? Let's start with the Dovbush T10, the unassuming drone that's flipping the script in this brutal war. This military-grade drone was first announced in December 2022 as one of Ukraine's first forays into domestic drone production. At the time, the drone was designed specifically as a surveillance-only drone. Unlike classic military drone models that would be used for surveillance, such as the Skyton Raybird 3, another Ukrainian drone type, the Dovbush T10 was made to be practically disposable. First, the drone has a relatively short range compared to its big brothers, with a maximum relay range of around 25 miles. This means that it could only feasibly be deployed at or around an active front line to be of any use. Otherwise, the drone could easily get out of range of its controller and just follow its last input command until it inevitably drops out of the sky due to wind or enemy fire. In fact, this actually happened in September 2023, when a Dovbush T10 drone was found stuck in a tree by Russian forces. However, while the drone by itself is relatively harmless, it has significantly higher potential, a deadly potential. While it was primarily designed as a surveillance-only drone, it has a solid carrying capacity of around 44 pounds. This means that it could easily carry a modified grenade or even a TM62 anti-tank mine, which could then be dropped from the sky. There are no recordings of the drone used as an ordnance-dropping device, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that this strategy was previously experimented with or even tested among Ukrainian forces. After all, the initial report in December 2022 suggested that the Dovbush could be used for exactly this purpose with some modifications. But where the Dovbush seems to shine is its stealthy operation capabilities. The drone is atypically light for its size and transmitting capacity, allowing it to perform covert intelligence or surveillance operations. This is supported by the drone's extremely simple deployment options. The rack that the drone uses to launch itself into the sky can be mounted on pretty much any pickup truck. It allows the drone operating crew to load drones without using military-grade equipment, and on vehicles that are much faster and more agile than typical infantry support, which can keep the drone operators away from danger. Speaking of drone operators, the Dovbush T10 has a dual GPS and inertial navigation system that the two-way data link relies on to position the drone against both the operating base and the ground. The inertial navigation system serves as an important backup, as it's an entirely internal system that doesn't depend on data transfer to operate for a limited time. This means that the drone is much less likely to be affected by signal jamming technology. Against an opponent like Russia, which has practically mastered jamming technology in the last few years, this can be a game changer. Russia's advances in this area come from the fact that the country has its own drone program similar to Ukraine's, using commercial-grade kamikaze drones. However, Russia also has the somewhat inherent advantage of being allied with China, which hosts some of the largest players in the commercial drone development field, particularly in terms of navigation and guidance technology. The Dovbush T10 has another last trick up its sleeve to make it even more effective on the battlefield. It's cheap. According to an interview in 2023 with the co-founder of the company that makes the drone, the estimated cost of the basic Dovbush T10 model, which presumably has the GPS and INS system and a camera, is a paltry $12,000. While this is a much higher price tag than commercial entertainment drones such as the aforementioned DJI Mavic, which costs in the range of $2,000, the price is a drop in the bucket compared to more advanced long-range drones, which can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to make. Why is this important? Well, this war is also a battle of funding. For Russia, the only real way to take a drone down that's hovering a few hundred feet in the air is to launch a guided missile or another drone at it. The first option is particularly devastating, as a buck missile, which was sometimes used for this precise purpose, is estimated to have cost the Russian government approximately $200,000 to make. This means that Russia is effectively sinking 15 times more money into countering what is essentially a surveillance drone. In the first report from December 2022, it was estimated that Dovbush T10s could be used to cover the entire front line at a rate of 1 drone per 6 miles of the front line. Conservative estimates put the number of drones needed for this task between 500 and 600. To put this into perspective, if Russia would use $500 to take out those drones, it would cost its military $100 million in missiles alone. But the newest innovation that uses the Dovbush doesn't rely just on that drone. The latest imagery suggests that the Dovbush drones are used to carry 6 smaller commercial kamikaze drones under their wings. The method of transport is also somewhat unusual. In a stroke of genius, the Dovbush T10 was minimally modified to include only the previous mentioned ordnance carrying capabilities. The kamikaze drones have the ordnance strapped onto them, and the ordnance is then attached to the T10's equipment mounts scattered under the wings. In essence, the ordnance itself serves as an adapter between the larger and smaller drones, with no direct contact between them. The kamikaze drones lie upside down until they are deployed, which is done by simply dropping their ordnance from the Dovbush to disengage the lock. Each kamikaze drone can fly independently from the Mothership T10. However, they remain linked electronically. This is due to the lower radio range of the smaller drone, and one of the main reasons the T10s are used as the delivery platform. The T10's larger antenna and repeater are borrowed for the use of the kamikaze drones. With small drones having a range of only a few miles before they start running into signal problems, the repeaters on the T10 effectively allow the kamikaze drones to be controlled by operators who could be up to 25 miles away. The stronger two-way data link between the T10 and the operator interface means that the system has practically the same reliability and safety as when connecting the kamikaze drones directly to the operator. But there's another important aspect of using the T10 as the mothership. The drone can be used to confirm strikes and kills. As you'd expect to be the case with first-person view kamikaze drones, the camera feed inevitably cuts off at the moment of impact and detonation. This means that until now, the Ukrainian army would either need to guess the level of inflicted damage upon the enemy or use a separate drone to conduct surveillance. The Dovbush T10 solves that problem neatly. Due to its excellent surveillance capabilities and a flight system that has some loitering capabilities, by allowing the drone to turn in a relatively small circle to maintain altitude over a certain point or area, the large drone can take off, deploy its smaller kamikaze drones, and then wait around until they reach their targets. With the main drone's larger battery life, the smaller drones even have a chance to loiter around and evade enemy counterattacks to a degree, directly improving their odds of surviving an encounter until they can be detonated for maximum effect. Furthermore, the T10 was specifically designed to be a stealth operation drone, unlike its smaller kamikaze cousins. Due to a significantly smaller noise profile and better anti-electronic warfare capabilities, the Dovbush has much better odds of going deeper behind enemy lines. This, coupled with the drone's larger range, potentially makes the innovative mothership system even deadlier than before. It could allow the Ukrainian army to target military compounds and infantry setups that were previously out of reach of the system, or would be much riskier for kamikaze drones alone. And through all that, the Ukrainians are still likely going to maintain one of the advantages that made drone warfare so prevalent in the first place: cost disparity. Even when fully loaded, so to speak, the Dovbush T10 with 6 kamikaze drones is much cheaper to mass produce and deploy than a military drone. The kamikaze drones have a practically insignificant price tag, considering they're made from commercial drones that often cost as little as a few $100 up to $3,000 for the more advanced models. The modified ordnance that's used on the drones are primarily grenades or artillery rounds, neither of which are particularly expensive to procure. In some cases, the Ukrainian military even gets more ordnance by raiding enemy positions after repelling Russian advances. Finally, there's the $12,000 price tag of the T10 itself. Considering that the modifications needed to convert the basic T10 to one that can carry kamikaze drones are minimal, as it already had the carrying capacity and most of the technical equipment, the added costs are unlikely to be more than a few $1,000s. When put together, the entire loadout could be estimated to cost as little as $30,000 to up to $40,000 if we're being conservative. This still puts it miles ahead of traditional drones and missiles. For example, the Shahid 136, an Iranian drone that Russia frequently uses to conduct large-scale attacks, has an export cost of $193,000 per drone. The relative budget effectiveness of the Ukrainian drone industry is one of the few ways its military has managed to eke out somewhat of an advantage over Russia. With the drones being so cheap to produce, easy to deploy, difficult to intercept, yet effective at sniping targets over distances comparable to artillery, it's no wonder that Ukraine has managed to keep its war efforts up as long as it has. Speaking of artillery comparison, Russia has managed to maintain a consistent push into Ukraine's territory, precisely due to its advantage in modern artillery tactics and numbers. Russia basically outproduces the entire NATO pact in terms of artillery batteries and rounds, with an estimated 3 million rounds produced per year. Add to that the fact that North Korea has been found to supply Russia with more artillery rounds in the realm of 500,000 to 3 million across 6 months, and that's another 1 to 6 million rounds per year, assuming North Korea has kept a steady pace of manufacturing and exporting, which might not actually be true. The sheer influx of artillery rounds that Russia could use allows it to wage war over a significantly longer distance than a traditional foot soldier would allow it. However, artillery comes with an inherent cost. The artillery targeting systems used on both sides, despite significant improvements, are still unreliable. There's no certainty of whether they can hit a target, especially when approaching maximum range. Instead, Russia relies on saturation tactics, using a large number of batteries firing repeatedly to batter the Ukrainian side and spread the damage as far as possible. It's a tactic only made possible by Russia's overwhelming numbers and ammo availability. And yet, it doesn't seem to be working nearly as well as it needs for Russia to gain more ground. In contrast, first-person view drones are remarkably accurate due to the fact they are guided to their targets. They can chase and hit moving vehicles, drop bombs from a relatively safe height, and spot infantry with much more precision than long-range surveillance. All of these factors have influenced how both sides wage war. Tanks have been forced away from the front line itself, at least until drones are confirmed to be absent from it, or at least are not swarming the area. Russian tanks are so ineffective against drone-based tactics that its most modern tanks, the experimental T-14 Armata, have been rendered obsolete. The T-14 Armata was supposed to have the best protective plating out of any tank on the planet, while still having comparable mobility and armaments to modern Western tanks. And yet only 14 tanks ended up being finished in time to be deployed in the war. A few weeks after their first showcase on the front, reports streamed in of the Armatas being recalled from the war entirely. The answer, once again, lies in the prohibitive costs that tanks accrue compared to their efficiency. T-14s are estimated to cost around $5 to $9 million per vehicle, meaning losing a single tank to mere drone strikes would stagger Russia's military industry, backed by a couple of $1 million. While older tanks have even worse odds of surviving, they don't cost nearly as much and can be repaired much more easily at least. The infantry itself has also had a significant shift in how they approach the war. The recognizable buzz of propellers on commercial drones has become a telltale sign that an infantry squad has been spotted by an enemy drone and is likely going to be the next target. Infantrymen claim that the extensive use of drones on both sides of the conflict has made reinforcing dugouts and holding ground practically impossible, as there's no telling when and where a kamikaze or an ordnance-dropping drone might come from. And the most recent Ukrainian innovation will likely make the problem even worse. If the kamikaze drones only start flying after they are detached from the main T10 mothership, the entire loadout is significantly more difficult to notice by sound alone. Add to that the T10's ability to fly higher and over the FPV drones that Russia is using on the front line, and Ukraine has just significantly expanded its operational repertoire. In some ways, what Ukraine has made with this combination is a direct competitor to Russia's artillery. The T10 has a range of around 25 miles, which is around the same range at which modern artillery that doesn't use guided missiles operates. At the same time, the drones could be significantly more accurate at that distance and not nearly as loud. But perhaps most importantly, the system functions as its own reconnaissance system. With artillery, the targeting, or rather target acquisition, comes from complementary surveillance systems such as drones, vehicles, and satellites. The artillery crew only calculates the trajectory the round will need to take and fires away, and once the shot is made, there's no way to reorient or take it back. In contrast, when using a drone that carries other, smaller drones, the operators remain fully in control from the beginning of the mission until the end. If the drone doesn't find a suitable target, it likely can turn back and start again after it recharges. And even when the drones are deployed, each unit is practically independent and can function for a mile or two out of the mothership, performing target acquisition and engagements in practically real time. There's one possible flaw to the current system that the Ukrainians have unveiled. The ordnance deployment system on the T10 is irreversible and needs to be manually reset. This means that once a kamikaze drone has disengaged, it will need to find a target. Otherwise, the only real option for salvaging the drone would be to abort the entire operation and have the drones fly next to one another until they return to the operator. This is because the drone would eventually lose its network signal once it's sufficiently away from either the T10 or the operator's system, where the range is highly unlikely to overlap in real-world scenarios. This means that every time a kamikaze drone is dispatched, it's a surefire loss for the Ukrainian military. Of course, if the drone manages to find a target and take out soldiers, destroy enemy vehicles, or compromise enemy positions, it's still a net positive for the Ukrainian military. But if it doesn't, the operator has to detonate it or risk giving Russia a free drone and ordnance they can reuse. However, despite the increased risk and cost of the new system, it still shows much more promise than the traditional use of kamikaze drones. However, despite the increased risk and cost of the new system, bear in mind that Ukraine is unlikely to completely forego using kamikaze drones directly on the front line for the new system either. A combination of the two is probably going to be even deadlier than before. With the T10 acting as a relay for the drone network, even an empty one can still artificially increase the range of other drones in its vicinity, furthering its use cases on the battlefield. Additionally, depending on the network configuration, it's unclear how intercompatible two different drones are. In the most optimistic case, launching more than one T10 would allow each of the kamikaze drones to effectively work in the cumulative network ranges that all T10s cover, creating a much wider danger zone. And there are even more possibilities for the system to become deadlier with the advances in AI. One of the areas in which drones are already relatively effective, target acquisition, is what arguably makes them superior to other long-range options, such as the aforementioned artillery. However, actual statistics from the Ukrainian military suggest that the acquisition rate for drones seems to have faltered over the past few months. The reason for this is relatively simple. Russia has an extensive jamming network, and while the larger Dovbush T10 is supposed to have countermeasures in place to prevent it from being jammed, the FPV kamikaze drones are unlikely to be as advanced. This has led to the initial target strike rate dropping from 50% to 30%, with newer operators having a strike rate as low as 10%. It means that only 1 in 10 drones actually manages to detonate its ordnance when it locates a target. The Russian jamming systems typically work by preventing instructions from being passed between the operator and the drone. With the detonation being largely manual, it means that a jammed drone can harmlessly fall to the ground or be forced to detonate early. The proposed AI systems are designed to remove this vulnerability, upping the first strike rate to 80%. The AI advancement would allow the software to pick up human and most common vehicle signatures from the drone's camera feed. Then the system would outline potential targets for the operator to choose from. After an operator picks a target, the AI navigates the drone independently of the operator and detonates the ordnance. With the AI system being housed inside the drone and only the operator interface for target acquisition, the drone would have a much higher chance of successfully striking a target while under signal jammers. This works because the independence of the targeting and navigational systems would mean that the latter won't be affected by external factors. The most recent report from the end of October suggested that between 10,000 and 15,000 drone units were being outfitted with various versions of the AI systems, with multiple companies competing to place a successful product on the market. While the number might seem impressive, Ukraine is estimated to produce around 4 million drones per year, with most of them likely being the FPV kamikaze drones. That means that the rollout of AI is actually slow compared to Ukraine's need for more effective targeting. There's also still uncertainty over whether the drones used for the Dovbush T10 combined system will have AI installed in them when they inevitably start being deployed onto the battlefield. Ukraine might decide to test out the system more intensely before adding more components to it. Additionally, the Dovbush T10 itself might get even more improvements. One of the proposed changes is to include separate air-to-surface munitions that the drone carries independently of its kamikaze drone loadout. This would increase the drone's own operating capabilities. However, the big limiter here is the guidance technology for the munition and the drone's relatively small carrying capacity. Taking off with 6 drones and ordnance in tow is likely reaching the limit of how much the T10 can carry, and severe modifications to the chassis could interfere with its speed, range, or maneuverability. But the other, more ambitious proposal is to improve the drone's operating range, with some sources suggesting a theoretical range of over 600 miles. This isn't unfeasible per se. Another Ukrainian military drone, the Skyton Raybird 3, has an estimated operating range of 150 miles, the distance it needs to stay connected to the nearest control link, and it's a similarly sized drone made for surveillance. Larger kamikaze drones have technology that goes significantly over that number. If implemented, the entire system could be deployed at significantly longer distances, which would either allow Ukraine to keep its drone operators much safer, or give its military yet another long-range precision strike option. With the recent long-range drone strikes and the US-approved ATACMS systems, this would be the third iteration of a system that functions over 150 miles away. It would add much-needed redundancy to Ukraine's repertoire. But even without the additions of AI, more ammunition, or a greatly improved range, the newly unveiled system is an ingenious improvement that shows just how much Ukraine has managed to accomplish with limited assistance. It's only a matter of time until we start seeing reports about how Ukrainians have started using it to turn the tide of the war yet again. But what do you think? Will this new system make a significant difference to the war, or is a bit more testing and improvement needed to make it truly shine? Thanks for watching, and leave your comments below. Now go and check out how Ukraine's paper planes are destroying Russia's military, or click this other video instead.